Okay, well, hello again. Now we're going to talk about our terms and conditions module. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop the video. I'll come back to you when we get done. So we'll go ahead and dive right into that. So again, this is your terms and concepts. This is supplemental material for the property and casualty pre-licensing exams. Now you're in the right place if you've been struggling with this P&C pre-licensing state exam and you really want this career change. You have taken a self-study or classroom class and there's so much material, it's very hard to figure out what is important. You want a streamlined approach to see what is important for the state test, and you want to learn the key points for each subject. So that makes sense, and that's what we're going to do. Now, about myself, I've been in the insurance industry for over 30 years. I've been teaching insurance classes for 27 years. I'm actually a subject matter expert for Pearson VUE. I've purchased several insurance agencies in addition to owning this insurance school. So the reason why I'm telling you all that is so I can tell you that I can safely say that I am in the trenches with you guys. So I'm going to give you some real life cases so that you will understand these points and can pass this test. I'd love for you to follow me on Facebook and LinkedIn. It's Tammy Delora Insurance Educators. We are going to prepare for this state exam, and by doing that, we're going to repeat things over and over again, and this will give you confidence to pass the state exam. So inhale your confidence and exhale doubt. The best time for new beginnings is now. Here's my disclaimer, because insurance does change, so I have to put this in there, and that way you can read that over. Now, what happens here is these terms and concepts that we need to know in our property and casualty world. And you really need to know what I call these codes. You're going to have a question, and it would be, for example, the following is chance or uncertainty. And they'll put risk there, and hazard, and negligence, and peril. And so if you don't know these terms, very backwards and forwards, again, repeating over and over again, it's going to be very difficult. So you need to know these terms so that you can pass, the 6 to 10 questions that is on the test. Now, a great way to learn these terms is repetition. And I do have some flashcards that are available on the website. And what they will have is there's flashcards that are on these terms and concepts as well, so that you can go through them and see what you know, maybe put them in a different stack, and then go back through them again, so that you will, like I said, memorize these cold. Now, what is risk? When you think about risk, what I want you to think about mainly is what is called uncertainty. And I'm going to bold that here. Risk is all about uncertainty. And this is what we are insuring, is the risk. Okay, so the chance or uncertainty of a loss occurring. There are two types of risk, pure and speculative. So on your state test, you're going to see risk is uncertainty and insurance is a pure risk, because there's the only possibility of a loss you cannot gain with insurance. Gambling is a speculative risk because there is a possibility of loss or gain. We are not talking about speculative risk here. We're talking about uncertainty, and we're talking about pure risk. Now, what is a hazard? A hazard is a condition that increases the chance of a loss happening. Now, the main thing with a hazard here is that the loss has not happened. So if you have a problem and it says that the pipes froze and there was a huge loss, that's not a hazard. Okay. Now, a hazard increases the chance of a loss. So some examples that we have are physical hazards. There could be a physical hazard with trampolines. It doesn't mean someone's going to get hurt. It doesn't mean there may never be a loss, but it is a hazard. If you have some steps and you don't have handrails, that is a hazard. It doesn't mean that there is a loss or the loss has happened. It just increases the chance of a loss happening. So these are the types of hazards that companies are looking for when they go and do outside inspections. Vicious dogs, faulty wiring, grease accumulation on a hood when they're talking about restaurant exposures for commercial. So again, hazards increase the chance of a loss. Now, moral hazards, there's not a lot we can do about those. Those involve the dishonest predisposition of the insured, such as an applicant convicted of arson or falsifying a claim. Morale hazards are when you have a careless attitude. And this is a lot of reasons why insurance companies put deductibles on things, because maybe the person will stop and think, hey, if I don't lock my doors to my house, I could probably have a theft. So again, those are some morale hazards, which are careless attitudes. Now, perils, we talked a lot about perils when we did our homeowners and our dwellings, like fire and lightning and wind. Those are all the cause of loss. That is a peril. So when you think about peril, think the cause of loss. Now, an economic loss, this is a financial loss or hardship. It is one of the elements of insurability. And in order to be insurable, it must cause financial or economic loss. So the insurance company must receive enough premium to make it feasible to provide insurance. And the insured has to feel like it will be a financial loss if they do not take out the product. Now, principal indemnity. Principal indemnity restores the insured to approximately the financial the financial condition they had before a loss occurred. So when you hear the words restore here, that is usually going to be your principle of indemnity. So think principle of indemnity, getting you back to where you were before the loss. Insurable interest, everybody has to have insurable interest. I can't go take out home insurance on my neighbor. You have to have insurable interest. Now, when does insurable interest really matter? At the time of loss. So, for example, if I were to sell my house on a Friday and I don't call the insurance company until Monday to cancel the insurance, maybe the closing was late, maybe I just wasn't thinking about it, and then Saturday that house catches on fire, because I don't own the house anymore, even though I'm still paying premiums on it, I cannot collect any type of claim payment. You have to have insurable interest at the time of loss. Same thing with cars. If you don't own the car and you have an accident, they're not going to give you the claim payment. Okay, so again, it's real important at the time of loss. Deductible, we've talked a lot about deductibles. This is what the insured must pay on each loss, and then the insurance company pays the remainder of the loss up to the policy limits. So insureds will sustain a portion of the loss with a deductible. Remember, insureds sustain a portion of the loss versus co-insurance is where the insured sustains a portion of the limit. Now, direct loss. Direct losses, we talked about in our homeowner policies how direct coverages were coverage A, dwelling, coverage B, other structures, and coverage C was contents. So a direct loss is a loss that actually can happen to a property, like a fire. And indirect loss is the financial consequences of the direct loss. Now remember, a indirect loss was your loss of use. Because you had a fire, you will now go stay in a hotel while your home is getting repaired. So that is an indirect loss. You cannot have an indirect loss unless you have a direct loss. So in this particular case, fire is a direct loss and the hotel expenses are the indirect loss. Now, named peril policies. We talked about named peril policies, which was your basic form and your broad form, and it named the perils in there. And if the perils are not listed, they are not covered, like fire and wind and lightning. Now, who determines those perils? The insurance company. The insurer doesn't have anything to do with it. Okay, the insurance company is the one that gives the policy to them. They determine what perils are going to be covered. Now, an open peril policy is also called an all-risk policy or a special policy. You may hear those words interchangeably, and this covers everything that's not excluded. Okay, typically things that are excluded are flood and earthquake and intentional and those types of things. Now, specific versus blanket. When you hear specific coverage or scheduled coverage, this lists specific property on the deck page and covers property for a specific amount. Whereas blanket covers more than one type of property at a single location or one or more items of property at multiple locations. So I'm going to share the screen with you here. And let's talk about this specific property a little bit and your blanket. So when you're talking about specific property, What happens here is, let's just say you have 3 locations insured for your client: location 1, location 2, and location 3. And let's say that the first location maybe has some contents limits of, and I'm just making this up as I go along, 150,000. And then the second location may have some contents limits of 300,000. And then this fourth location is a warehouse, not that it matters, but it maybe has a location contents of 500,000. So what happens here, these are specific to each location. If there's a loss, it's going to pay the loss up to this policy limit here. Okay, so what is a blanket? Well, a blanket is that situation where maybe this property is on the move. Maybe you're going to take $200 here, $200,000 of contents, and move it here to location 2. Then you're going to take 50,000 of that and move it over here. Then you're going to take some location contents of location 1 and move it down here. I mean, you get the point. These contents are always on the move. And what if this is underinsured? What if you have a lot of contents at location 1 and you have a fire? And 150,000 may not be enough. So if you have a situation where you have a client that moves their property a lot, you may want to consider blanketing it. And it usually happens on commercial risks, not usually on personal. So you would probably blanket this. So just as an example, we may blanket like at 950,000 type thing. That way, no matter what happens at one of those locations, it is always covered. And so that would be your specific versus your blanket coverage. Okay, moving on here. We have some property loss valuations. Remember, in our insurance world, we usually do not use market value. We usually use actual cash value, replacement cost, functional, and salvage. Now, what do these mean? Well, when it comes to your actual cash value, remember your actual cash value is replacement cost minus depreciation. We don't really like actual cash value that much because it basically takes depreciation in effect. Replacement cost refers to cost to repair or replace it without considering depreciation. And then functional replacement costs, sometimes you'll see this where maybe you can't replace something. It's very hard to replace it because it maybe has ornate or antique or custom construction. So you will replace it with less expensive but functional equivalent materials. Usually the example is where the insurance company cannot replace materials of like size and quality, so they will come up with some functional replacement cost. Now, there's a whole world out there for salvage value. This is a provision of the policy that states once the insurer pays the insured for a loss, the damaged property belongs to the insurance company. And think about salvage like, for example, with auto. If a company totals an automobile, they take the automobile and then maybe they will reduce their net cost of the claims by selling off some things for the auto. And that's called salvage. Now, when it comes to a mortgagee or a loss payee, these are lenders with insurable interests. They're named on the deck page. The mortgage condition specifies their rights and duties. Mortgage companies have duties as well. They're not a named insured, but they do have financial interest in the property. They are responsible if, for example, if there's a claim, they want to have their name on the claim check. They want to have cancellation notices sent to them. Misrepresentation, breach of warranties, and concealments. Always remember, if you have any of these 3 things, the policy will be voided because it's considered material. Now, what is material? Material means that the insurance company would not have written it had they known. That is material. So misrepresentation is a statement made by the applicant about a material fact on the application that is not true. So a policy can be voided on this basis. Now, breach of warranties. Breach of warranties is typically like, for example, a security system. And the insurer says they have a security system, they don't install it, and there's a loss. And so they usually have to sign this piece of paper saying that is a warranty, and the insurance company can deny the claim. Concealment is when an applicant intentionally withholds a material fact. In other words, the company would not have written it had they known. So again, those 3 things will make a policy be voided. Now, a different subject here is negligence. When we're thinking about negligence, this is about liability, and that's what we are ensuring is negligence. It's the lack of a reasonable care that is required to protect others from the unreasonable chance of harm. For example, an owner removes a leash from the dog and the dog bites a third party. If they did not mean for the dog to bite a third party and they remove the leash not thinking and the dog bites someone, that is negligence. That is what insurance is paying for. And that is liability. It's injury to a third party. Now, keep in mind, all of your supplemental payments, you're going to have your liability limits. And then over here in a different bank, you're going to have supplemental payments. And these are claim expenses that are extra coverage above the limit of liability. So keep in mind in your personal auto, your commercial auto, and in your general liability policies, you have supplemental payments, and they are additional limits to the liability to pay for claim expenses. And it's all about paying for claim expenses. When it comes to liability, you have bodily injury, property damage, and this is injury, sickness, disease, and death is bodily injury. Property damage is damage to someone else's property to a third party. Now, personal injury is libel, slander, false arrest, wrongful entry, violation of privacy, and malicious prosecution. Homeowner policies do not automatically have personal injury. Remember, homeowner policies only have bodily injury and property damage. If you want personal injury, you have to endorse it. General liability policies provide this coverage automatically. Now, accidents and occurrences basically mean the same thing, but you've got to make sure that you put them in the right situation. Home policies are per occurrence. Remember, they automatically come with $100,000 per occurrence. Auto policies are per accident. Boiler and machinery policies are per accident. All right. Examples of an accident would be a sudden break of a pipe. An occurrence is over a period of time, but make sure that you put each one where they're supposed to go. A certificate of insurance is totally different than a binder. This is a form that verifies a policy has been written. Usually contractors will get a certificate of insurance showing that they do have coverage. So the policy's been written, it is done. It is a summary of what the coverage is that's provided. Now, binders are totally opposite of that. They can be oral, they can be written, and they provide immediate insurance protection for a specified period, 60 days. They are temporary coverage. The policy may or may not be approved because remember, most of the time, companies have so many days to underwrite a policy. So it may or may not be approved. Insurance agents and companies issue your binders. Endorsements. Anytime you hear endorsements, you're going to think a change to the policy. You know, it could be a change like a situation where you have a telephone number, an address change, or it could be a change of a car. It is a change to the policy. It is documented to the policy, and it is attached to the policy. Liberalization clause. This is where a condition in the policy that provides that if the insurance company broadens coverage under a policy form without additional premium, then everybody's policy that took it out before then will be broadened as well. The main thing you need to know here is that it is immediate. You do not need to wait on this. There is no waiting period. And it saves the company thousands and thousands of processing endorsements because if something happens to that insured and they did have a change in their policy before they took it out, then it will be covered or after they took it out. First named insurers, those are found in commercial policies. This is the first person listed in the deck. They are considered to have higher responsibilities. They are the ones that pay the premiums. They're the ones that cancel the policies. They're responsible for audits. This is your first named insured. And again, when you think about first named insurers, I want you to think about how these are involved usually in your commercial policies. Monoline versus package. An insurance company that provides one type of coverage is monoline, packages two. Usually when it comes to package policies, they can get discounts. Now, your major classes of policy provisions, this is also called, the acronym for this is called DICE, and that's how you can remember this as declarations, insuring agreement, conditions, exclusions, and definitions is an easy way to remember that. Notice endorsements are not part of this. So your declaration is your information page. This is the policy, the information page that differentiates my policy from someone else. It's got my name on there, address, effective, expiration dates, even your agency information, description of your business. Is this a restaurant or a daycare? Premiums, coverages. Your definitions clarify the meaning. You know, what is bodily injury? What is property damage? Now, when it comes to insuring agreements, this describes what is covered, and I call it the P's. It's all about perils. It's all about the policy, the perils the policy insures again, and it's all about promise to pay. You know, again, I always call it the P's. So if you hear anything about perils or promises to pay, that type of thing, this is what we're talking about. So it is all about your P's here. Okay, promise to pay. So again, perils, promise to pay. Exclusions are things that are not covered in the policy. And conditions, whenever you hear the word duties, that is your conditions of the policy. So duties would be conditions. And again, these are major classes of policy provisions, and note endorsements are not a part of that. Insurance, when you see the word transfer, transfers insurance, just like risk is uncertainty. Insurance doesn't eliminate or reduce it, it transfers the risk. So when you get up in the morning, you don't think, well, I'm going to drive my car, but I better not, because if I have an auto accident, it could cost me thousands of dollars. You have transferred that risk to the insurance company. When it comes to your application, this is the main source of underwriting. It is considered a representation. Just memorize that word. This form contains information used to underwrite the policy. It is a statement of good faith. Now, there's a lot of things about subrogation. An example of subrogation would be where I'm sitting in my home and all of a sudden I hear this huge crash and I go outside and a dump truck has hit my home. Okay. Now we do have the peril of auto if an auto hits your home, but really who should pay for that loss? The driver of the truck, right? Well, maybe that company's gone insolvent or they're having a hard time getting them to answer the phone. So since there is the peril of auto on the homeowner policy, what will happen is the homeowner could turn in a claim in their own policy. And then what will happen is the insurance company will go ahead and pay that claim, the homeowner's policy. So their homeowner's insurance company will go ahead and pay it. Now, to keep the insured from having double protection there, they will take away the owner's right to sue the trucking company because they have already indemnified the homeowner, and that is subrogation. So it's the transfer of the insurance company of the insured's right to collect damages. So they are taking away the insured's right to go to the trucking company because the insurance company, their homeowner's policy, has already paid for it. Most companies have this subrogation clause. It prevents double protection because remember, you cannot gain from insurance. Assignment of the insured's rights to the company, legal rights from the insured to the insurance company. All of that is subrogation. Insurance is a contract. It is an unusual contract. It's a contract of adhesion. It is where one party has more power than the other party. And of course, that would be the insurance company. They're the ones that say what is covered, what is not covered. So usually when you write up a contract with somebody, you have some negotiations. Maybe somebody does something and then you get this type of you negotiate things. Well, in an insurance contract, there is no negotiations. It is one party has more power than the other party. A consent to rate, you used to have the insured sign a consent to rate if the insured was being charged a rate higher than what the bureau said. Now the insured does not have to sign that form. It will be printed in bold letters on the property if that insurance company is charging more than the rate bureau. We talked about the law of large numbers a little bit in the homeowner world where we're all paying on each other's losses. This states that the more examples used to develop the statistics, the more reliable they will be. The larger the number of exposures, the closer the actual results will be for the predicted results. And companies like to have a spread of risk. They don't want to just insure things in one area that have a lot of windstorms or tornadoes or floodings or that type of thing. Adverse selection is the tendency of insurers with greater than average chance of loss to purchase insurance. So that is one of the reasons why with flood insurance, they have a 30-day period there, because they don't want people that need flood insurance right away. There's a big storm coming in. That is not what insurance is for. They want to insure, everyone. Hostile fire, insurance companies cover the hostile fire, friendly fires in a fireplace. Proximate cause, that is that very first peril that happens. Cancellation, the termination of a policy before its expiration date. Either the insured or the insurance company can do that. It can be voluntary or involuntary. Non-renewal, this is that situation where the termination of policy at its expiration date. So the company's going to hold it over to the end of the expiration date. But at that expiration date, they are not going to give an offer of renewal. Now, remember, when it comes to vacancy, companies do not like vacancy, and perils will be excluded usually after 60 days. This could be freezing of pipes. This could be theft, glass, burglary, and vandalism. Those are usually the perils that are excluded. Unoccupied means property but no people. A building is not vacant if it's just unoccupied. People are at work and they're not in their home. Waiver is a voluntary or intentional relinquishment of a known right by the insurance company. And again, insurance companies are, they do have contracts. They are a contract, and it has to contain, and if you notice here, the acronym is CLOC: competent parties, legal purpose, offer and acceptance, consideration. So what is consideration? That is something of value provided by each party. The insured is giving premium payment, and the insurance company is giving a promise to pay for covered losses. The key is compliance. Now, when we're talking about liability, we're mainly insuring negligence. This is a lack of reasonable care that is required to protect others from the unreasonable chance of harm, and failure to exercise the care that a reasonable, prudent person would have shown under the same circumstances. It is not an intentional act. We are insuring negligence. It is an unintentional tort. A tort is a wrongdoing. What is negligence? This is what insurance is covering: a legal duty owed, a breach of that duty, and resulting bodily injury or property damage. We have a legal duty to drive safely. Maybe we are sleepy and we fall asleep while we're driving, so that results in bodily injury, property damage, and personal injury. That is negligence. That is what insurance is covering: liability, injury to a third party. Now, remember, your supplemental payments is that extra little bank over here for claim expenses. It's a separate bank from your liability limits. It's for defense costs, bond premiums, post-judgment expenses. It provides additional coverage for no additional premium. And again, we're insuring bodily injury, property damage, and personal injury. Personal injury is always added to the homeowner policies. It has to be endorsed. In your general liability policies, it is automatic. And we already talked about accidents and occurrences, how you need to put those on the right place. Your accidents are going to be your auto and bore machinery, and your home policies are going to be on a per occurrence limit. You will have aggregate limits in the commercial general liability policies. Remember, your aggregate limits, you have 2 aggregate limits, and once they're done for the year. Whereas occurrences and accidents, per occurrence and per accident, the limits start all over again when there's another claim. Not with aggregate, which is in your general liability policy. You have aggregate limits. Now, your auto has automobile split limits. You can have combined limits in your automobile for bodily injury and property damage. Now, when it comes to deposit premium and audit, this is for your commercial policies. Premiums are paid at the beginning of the policy period based on the estimate of the final premium amount. Usually what happens here, like in workers' compensation and general liability, maybe they're based on payroll and sales. And as you know, payroll and sales can go up or down. So at the beginning of the year, they will say the deposit premium. They won't say your premium is. They will say your deposit premium is this, because that is your estimated premium. At the end of the year, there's an audit to determine your actual exposures. So if you have more payroll or more sales, they'll charge you additional premium. If you have less payroll or sales, you'll get money back. Now, the only policies that are usually audited are commercial general liability and workers' comp. Umbrellas are not audited. A proof of loss. What is a proof of loss? This is after a client has a loss and they need to provide an official inventory of damages. Now, if the company needs a proof of loss, they don't always do, but if they do need a proof of loss, they have 15 days to submit the form, and the form must be signed by the insured in 60 days. So the pooling of loss experienced by insurers make the losses more predictable. And what is a certificate of authority? This is where insurance companies have a right to perform business in a specific state, is your insurance, your certificate of authority. Okay, so I'm going to come back to you for a few minutes here. So that would be your terms and conditions. And again, what I would do is I would really study those terms and conditions and know those pretty cold. Know some buzzwords like risk is uncertainty, insurance is transfer, those types of things. Subrogation takes away the insurer's right to sue that third party. Principle of indemnity is restoring the insured back to the way they were. So just know those buzzwords so that you can pick those out and get those, what I call freebies, correct for sure. All right, going back here to the PowerPoint. Again, we have finished another section here. So at this time, we're going to start on our commercial. So we'll have commercial auto, commercial general liability, some commercial property, and those types of things. Again, to prepare, just repeat these things over and over again. Be sure to read your study guide and take your test questions in addition to these slides as well, because that'll help you build confidence. Again, we generate fears while we sit and we overcome them by action. All right, so I will see you in the next module.